When the Winters family bought a parrot for their daughter's birthday, they expected it to bring joy and laughter into their home. But just days later, the cheerful bird began to repeat chilling words that no one in the family could explain. They thought it was just a coincidence, until the parrot mentioned the name of their missing neighbor. For the Winters family, life in the quiet suburbs of Harlow had always been ordinary, predictable even. James Winters was a history teacher at the local high school. His wife, Martha, ran a cozy home bakery from their kitchen, filling the house each morning with the warm, sweet scent of cinnamon rolls and fresh bread. Their daughter, Emily, had just turned 12, a bright-eyed, curious girl with a love for animals. Which is exactly why, on Emily's birthday, James decided to surprise her with something special. Not a dog, as she had begged for countless times. Not a cat, which Martha had firmly vetoed due to allergies. But something different, something unexpected. A parrot. The moment Emily laid eyes on the bright green bird perched in the cage at the pet shop, she gasped with delight. "He's perfect!" she squealed, pressing her face to the glass. The parrot tilted his head, regarding her with curious, beady eyes. Then, as if to seal the deal, he let out a cheerful squawk that sounded suspiciously like, "Hello!" Emily was sold. And so, the Winters family welcomed Charlie into their home. From the start, Charlie proved to be more than just a pet. He was a full-fledged member of the household. It took him less than a week to pick up Emily's giggle, Martha's whistle as she kneaded dough, and James's habitual morning greeting, "Rise and shine." He mimicked the microwave beeps, the doorbell, even the creak of the front gate. Emily loved teaching him new phrases, spending hours repeating sentences in the hope that Charlie would catch on. And catch on he did. "Good morning. Time for treats. Emily is the best." Charlie's antics filled the house with laughter. Even Martha, despite her initial reservations, found herself smiling at the bird's endless chatter. Then, one crisp autumn afternoon, something changed in the air. Emily had just returned from school, tossing her backpack onto the floor, when she heard Charlie mumble something new. "Lisa. Lisa, ... She frowned, stepping closer to his cage. "What did you say, Charlie?" The parrot tilted his head and repeated, clearer this time. "Lisa. Help." Emily's brow furrowed. Lisa. That was the name of their neighbor, Lisa Monroe, the sweet, middle-aged woman who taught third grade at the same school where her dad worked. She had always been kind to Emily, waving from her garden, sometimes slipping her homemade cookies over the fence. Emily shook her head, laughing nervously. "Mom, Charlie's being weird." Martha, busy icing cupcakes at the kitchen counter, didn't look up. "Probably something he heard on TV," she said dismissively. But Emily couldn't shake the odd chill prickling at the back of her neck. Lisa had been missing for days now. It had been the talk of the town. Lisa Monroe hadn't shown up for work at the school. She hadn't answered her phone, and when her sister stopped by to check on her, Lisa's car was still in the driveway. But she was nowhere to be found. The police had come, asked their questions, canvassed the neighborhood. But nothing had come of it. No evidence, no witnesses, no answers. James had shaken his head that night at dinner, frowning as he read the article on his phone. "Terrible thing," he said. "No sign of forced entry. No struggle. It's like she just vanished." Charlie, from his perch, squawked loudly, "Lisa!" The family froze. James's eyes narrowed. "Did he just—" Emily nodded, wide-eyed. "Charlie, what's Lisa?" she asked, her voice a mixture of curiosity and unease. Charlie bobbed his head, fluffed his feathers, and replied, "Let me go." A chill settled over the room. Martha set down her piping bag, her fingers trembling slightly. Emily, where did he learn that? She asked, her voice tight. I don't know, Emily stammered. Maybe from the news? But deep down, she wasn't sure. Charlie had never been this specific before. Sure, he copied sounds and simple phrases. But this felt intentional. James tried to rationalize it. Birds repeat what they hear, he said, forcing calm into his tone. Maybe Lisa said that to someone in passing, and Charlie overheard it. But Martha shook her head. James, Lisa hasn't been here in weeks. Silence pressed in around them. Charlie, oblivious to the tension, preened his feathers and let out another chilling echo. Please, stop. That night, after Emily had gone to bed, James and Martha sat at the kitchen table, staring at the bird. He perched on one foot, eyes half closed, looking as innocent as ever. But the weight of his words lingered in the air. Do you think? Martha began, but trailed off. James pinched the bridge of his nose. I don't know, he admitted. It could all be coincidence. Or, Martha countered, it could be something else. Her eyes darkened with concern. James? What if he heard something we didn't? The following morning, James did something he never thought he'd do. He set up a voice recorder next to Charlie's cage. If we're imagining things, he reasoned, at least we'll know. Emily watched curiously as her father pressed the record button. Let's see what you've got to say for yourself, Charlie, James said softly. The parrot blinked, tilted his head, and remained silent. Hours passed. Charlie whistled a few times, mimicked the kitchen timer, and said his usual phrases. But then, just before noon, as Martha rolled out dough for a fresh batch of bread, Charlie's tone shifted. His voice deepened, rougher, an imitation of someone else's voice entirely. No one will find you, he rasped. Martha's hands froze mid-roll. James's heart pounded in his chest. Before they could react, Charlie continued, a string of fragmented phrases tumbling from his beak. Don't scream. Quiet, now. Lisa, quiet. Martha covered her mouth with her hands, tears springing to her eyes. James grabbed the recorder, his fingers trembling. There was no denying it now. Charlie wasn't just mimicking random sounds. He was repeating something he had heard. And if that was true, then Charlie had been a witness to something unspeakable. As night fell over the Winters' home, an icy tension settled in their bones. James transferred the recordings to his laptop, playing them over and over, analyzing every syllable. Martha paced the kitchen, her mind racing. Emily sat quietly at the table, hugging her knees to her chest, eyes wide and fearful. Charlie, oblivious to the storm he had unleashed, fluffed his feathers and chirped cheerfully. Good morning, he squawked. Then, softer, more chilling, help me, please. The next morning, no one in the Winters household ate breakfast. The plates sat cold and untouched on the table, while James hunched over his laptop, playing and replaying the audio recordings from the night before. Martha hovered behind him, arms crossed tightly over her chest, eyes glued to the screen as if willing the words to make sense. Emily sat curled on the couch, clutching her knees, her gaze flicking nervously between her parents and the parrot in the corner. Charlie chirped, fluffed his feathers, and let out a casual, "Good morning." The cheerful greeting sent a shiver down Martha's spine. There was something chilling about the ordinary, innocent sound of the bird. The same bird who, only hours earlier, had uttered words that didn't belong in any normal household. James paused the recording, rubbing his temples. I can't believe this, he muttered. Martha's voice trembled. We have to call the police. James hesitated. Will they even take us seriously? He asked. Martha met his eyes, her voice firm despite the fear quivering beneath it. "We have to try." At first the police were skeptical. The dispatcher's tone on the phone was polite, but clearly doubtful. "A parrot, sir?" "Yes," James replied tightly. "He's been repeating phrases, things that sound like what happened to Lisa Monroe." There was a pause. "We'll send someone to follow up," the dispatcher said, with the practiced neutrality of someone accustomed to bizarre calls. When Officer Claire Dawson arrived an hour later, she tried to keep her expression neutral, but James could see the skepticism in her eyes. He didn't blame her. After all, this sounded ridiculous. But then he played the recording. The room fell silent as Charlie's voice filled the space. "Lisa, help. No one will find you." Claire's brow furrowed. She leaned closer, listening intently. "What else can he say?" she asked. Charlie obliged without prompt. "Please stop. Don't scream." Claire's eyes widened just a fraction. "I think I need to make a call," she said quietly. Within hours, 2 detectives arrived, along with an audio forensics expert. They set up equipment in the living room, attaching microphones near Charlie's cage, while the Winters family watched from across the room in a mixture of fear and awe. The specialist, a tall man with sharp features and a no-nonsense demeanor, spoke softly to the bird. "Hello, Charlie." Charlie bobbed his head. "Hello," he chirped. The specialist smiled faintly, then played back portions of the original recording through a speaker. Charlie perked up at the sound of his own voice and immediately began to mimic the phrases again, adding new fragments as if they were part of a familiar song. "Quiet now. Lisa, quiet." The specialist's smile faded. "This is no random noise," he said grimly. "He's repeating what he heard." They recorded every word, every sound. The specialist then ran the audio through analysis software, isolating specific voice patterns and tonal inflections buried beneath Charlie's mimicry. As the analysis progressed, the tension in the room thickened like storm clouds. Minutes passed, then an hour. Finally, the specialist looked up, his expression grim. "We have a match," he said. He tapped the screen, pulling up a voice comparison file. The parrot's imitation matches the vocal profile of Tom Granger. James felt his stomach lurch. "Tom Granger?" Martha echoed, her face pale. "He's Lisa's sister's boyfriend," James said slowly, recalling seeing the man at block parties and neighborhood gatherings. "He's always been around, helped with yard work, fixed things around her house." The specialist nodded. "And he was interviewed early in the investigation. But he had an alibi. Nothing solid to hold him on. Until now." The detectives moved quickly. They secured a warrant for Granger's property, just a few streets over from the Winters' home. The entire neighborhood seemed to hold its breath as police cars, detectives, and a forensic team descended upon the old farmhouse at the end of Maple Lane. James, Martha, and Emily watched the scene unfold from their porch, a heavy knot of anxiety tightening in their chests. Charlie, oblivious to the drama he had set in motion, flapped his wings and called out cheerfully, "Lisa! Help!" The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Hours later, Detective Dawson returned to the Winters' home, her face grave but resolute. "You were right," she said. The parrot wasn't just repeating words at random. She took a steadying breath. "We found Lisa. She was being kept in a hidden basement room under the farmhouse. Alive. Weak, but alive." Martha's hand flew to her mouth as tears welled in her eyes. James felt his knees buckle slightly, relief and horror crashing over him in equal measure. Emily let out a choked sob and buried her face in her mother's embrace. Charlie, as if sensing the release of tension, squawked brightly, "Good job! The adults exchanged a glance, a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. Charlie, their silly, talkative, feathered companion, had just helped save a life. In the days that followed, the story spread like wildfire. Local news channels featured segments on the hero Parrot, and reporters clamored for interviews. James found himself sitting on a morning show couch, Charlie perched proudly on his arm, while the host beamed at them. "Charlie, you're quite the detective," the host quipped. Charlie fluffed his feathers and replied, perfectly on cue. "Help me!" The audience gasped, a murmur rippling through the crowd. James managed a nervous laugh, but his mind couldn't shake the weight of those words. Even as they celebrated, even as Lisa recovered in the hospital, a nagging thought gnawed at the back of his mind. Had they really uncovered the whole truth? Or was there more? That night, as the family settled in for bed, James lingered in the living room, staring at Charlie's cage. The parrot dozed peacefully, head tucked under his wing. James sighed and turned off the light. Just as he reached the doorway, Charlie stirred. In the darkness, his voice came soft and chilling. "It wasn't just him." James froze. The words hung in the air like smoke. He slowly turned back toward the cage, heart thudding in his chest. But Charlie had already gone quiet, drifting back into sleep. James swallowed hard, his mind racing. What did that mean? For most people in Harlow, the case felt closed. Lisa Monroe had been found alive. Her captor, Tom Granger, was behind bars, awaiting trial. The neighborhood had exhaled in relief, and the media frenzy slowly began to fade. But for James Winters, there was no peace. Not after what he'd heard. Not after Charlie's chilling words whispered in the dark. It wasn't just him. James couldn't stop thinking about it. What did Charlie mean? Was it just random mimicry, a leftover phrase from the original captor? Or was it something far more sinister? Martha tried to reassure him. He's a parrot, James. Maybe he's just mixing up words. But James wasn't convinced. Charlie had led them to the truth once. He couldn't ignore the feeling that the bird had more to say. And he was right. It happened 2 days later. James was working in the garage when he heard Charlie squawking loudly from the house. At first, he thought it was just his usual chatter. But something about the tone, frantic, sharp, made him drop his wrench and run. Bursting into the living room, he found Emily standing by the cage, wide-eyed. "Dad," she whispered, her voice trembling. James followed her gaze to Charlie, who flapped his wings and let out a hoarse imitation of a man's voice. "Hurry! Basement. Find the box." James's blood turned cold. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his throat tight. Emily nodded, her face pale. Charlie repeated the phrase, louder this time. "Hurry! Basement. Find the box." James felt a chill crawl down his spine. Tom Granger's house had already been searched thoroughly, hadn't it? James called Detective Dawson immediately. Within an hour, she and her team were back at the Granger property, this time with specialized search equipment. "We cleared the basement," Dawson said, scanning the space with a flashlight. "But maybe we missed something." James could only watch, heart pounding, as the officers moved through the dank, shadowed basement. One of them tapped the wall and frowned. "Something hollow," he murmured. They pried back a loose panel to reveal a small, rusted metal box wedged into the cavity. Dawson's eyes narrowed as she carefully lifted it free. Inside, they found a stack of photographs, folded maps, and, most chilling of all, a notebook filled with names. Dozens of names. Many were crossed out. Many belonged to women reported missing from nearby towns, their cases unsolved. Lisa Monroe's name was there, circled in red ink, but beneath it was another name, a name James recognized immediately. Martha Winters, his wife. The room seemed to tilt. James gripped the edge of the workbench, bile rising in his throat. They were planning something more, Dawson said grimly. Lisa wasn't the only target. She flipped through the notebook, her brow furrowing. There's another location marked here. It looks like a storage facility on the outskirts of town. Without wasting a second, the team mobilized. James insisted on going with them. The storage facility was an old, sprawling complex. Rows of rusted units baking under the afternoon sun. Dawson and her officers moved swiftly, checking unit by unit until they found it. Unit 47. Inside, they discovered chilling evidence of a larger operation. Locks, chains, surveillance equipment, personal belongings. And a second list, this one containing transaction records and payments from unknown sources. This wasn't just Granger working alone, Dawson confirmed, her voice tight with disgust. He was part of something much bigger. James felt his knees weaken. His family had been closer to danger than he had ever imagined. And it was Charlie who had cracked it open. Back at home, Martha and Emily clung to each other as James relayed the horrifying details. Charlie, perched on his stand, let out a low whistle. "Good boy," he croaked softly, almost as if to himself. Tears welled in Martha's eyes. "I can't believe it," she whispered. "He saved us. Again." James reached out and stroked Charlie's feathers gently. "You're more than a good boy," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're a hero." The news of the breakthrough spread quickly. Charlie became a local legend, his story picked up by national media. News anchors praised the crime-fighting Parrot, while social media flooded with fan art, memes, and tributes. Emily made a little medal out of foil and ribbon, hanging it proudly around Charlie's neck. He wore it like a champion. But in the quiet moments, when the cameras were gone and the crowds had dispersed, James still felt the lingering shadow of unease. One evening, as he sat alone in the living room, he glanced at Charlie, who seemed unusually quiet. "Is there more, buddy?" James asked softly. Charlie blinked, tilted his head, and after a pause, spoke in a hushed tone. "Still watching." A chill ran down James's spine. But then Charlie fluffed his feathers and began to whistle a cheerful tune, as if the ominous words had never been spoken. James exhaled shakily. Maybe it was over. Maybe. Life slowly returned to normal for the Winters family. Lisa Monroe recovered, grateful beyond words. The investigation uncovered a wider network of criminal activity, leading to multiple arrests and the closure of a horrifying chapter for their town. And Charlie? Charlie basked in his new status as a hero, loved by all. But every now and then, just as dusk settled over the house, he would whisper fragments of sentences that made James's skin crawl. "Don't look behind you. They're coming." Were they echoes of past horrors, or warnings of dangers yet to come? James didn't know, but one thing was certain. He would never underestimate Charlie again.